Vivienne Hart stood before the floor-length mirror in the bridal suite of Sacred Heart Cathedral, her hands smoothing down the ivory lace of her wedding gown. The dress was simple yet elegant, with delicate pearl beading along the bodice that caught the morning light streaming through the arched windows. Her dark hair was swept into a soft updo, adorned with tiny white roses that her grandmother Grace had helped arrange just an hour ago. She looked beautiful, radiant even, though her reflection seemed almost like a stranger wearing someone else's happiness. Outside the closed door, Vivienne could hear the gentle hum of conversation as guests filled the pews. 400 people had gathered to witness her marriage to Cameron Brooks, the man she had loved for 3 years. Cameron, with his easy smile and ambitious dreams, had promised her a future filled with adventure and stability. For someone like Vivienne, who had grown up in foster care before her grandmother took her in at age 12, the idea of building a family with someone felt like finally finding home. Her phone buzzed on the vanity table. Vivienne reached for it absently, expecting a sweet message from Cameron or perhaps a logistical update from the wedding coordinator. Instead, the words on the screen made her blood run cold. "I can't marry you. I'm sorry. I thought I was ready but I'm not. Please forgive me. Cameron." When dreams crumble. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the marble floor. Vivienne stared at the cracked screen, the message still glowing mockingly at her. Her breathing became shallow, rapid, as if all the air had been sucked out of the elegant room. She read it again, then again, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something different, something that made sense. A knock sounded at the door. Her grandmother's voice, warm and slightly worried, called through the wood. "Vivienne, darling, it's almost time. Are you ready?" "Ready." The word felt like a cruel joke. Vivienne looked at herself in the mirror again. The beautiful bride staring back at her now seemed like a painting of someone else's life, a portrait of joy that didn't belong to her anymore. Her chest tightened, tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not while people were waiting, expecting a celebration. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers and typed back a single word. "Why?" The message showed as read immediately, but no response came. Cameron, the man who had proposed to her under a sky full of stars 6 months ago, the man who had sworn to love her forever, couldn't even give her an explanation. He had simply vanished, leaving her standing in a wedding dress with a church full of witnesses to her humiliation. The walk of courage. Vivienne opened the door to find her grandmother, dressed in a soft lavender dress, her silver hair styled beautifully. Grace took one look at her granddaughter's pale face and knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. "He's not coming," Vivienne whispered, her voice barely audible. Cameron sent a text. "He's not coming." Grace's face crumpled with a mixture of shock and fury, but she quickly composed herself, pulling Vivienne into a tight embrace. "That coward," she hissed. "That absolute coward." For a moment, Vivienne allowed herself to lean into her grandmother's strength, to feel the safety of being held. But then she pulled back, straightening her spine with visible effort. "I have to tell them," she said quietly. "All those people are waiting." "You don't have to do anything," Grace insisted. "I can make an announcement. You can leave through the back entrance." But Vivienne shook her head. She had spent too many years of her childhood feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter. She wouldn't hide now, wouldn't let Cameron's cowardice turn her into a victim who disappeared in shame. If her heart was going to break, it would break in the light, not in shadows. "I need to do this," she said firmly. The moment everything changed. The cathedral's main doors opened with a heavy, echoing sound. Vivienne stood at the entrance, her bouquet of white lilies and pale pink roses clutched in her hands. The organist, not yet realizing anything was wrong, began playing the opening notes of the wedding march. 400 faces turned toward her, smiling, expectant, cameras raised to capture what should have been the happiest moment of her life. Vivienne's legs felt like they might give out beneath her, but she forced herself to take one step forward, then another. The aisle stretched before her like an impossible distance. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, painting everything in jewel tones of sapphire, ruby, and gold. It should have been magical. Instead, it felt surreal, like walking through a dream that was rapidly turning into a nightmare. She could feel the exact moment when people began to realize something was wrong. The whispers started softly, then grew louder. Where was the groom? Why was the bride walking alone? The smiles began to fade, replaced by confusion, then pity. At the front of the church, the altar stood empty except for the priest, Father Michael, who looked at Vivienne with growing concern. She reached the front, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, and turned to face the congregation. The man in the shadows. The silence was deafening. Vivienne opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form the words, her eyes caught on a figure standing near one of the stone pillars at the side of the church. A man, tall and commanding, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. He wasn't seated with the other guests. Instead, he stood slightly apart, as if he existed in his own space, separate from the chaos unfolding before him. Nathaniel Stone. Vivienne recognized him from the few times Cameron had mentioned his business mentor, the reclusive billionaire who had made his fortune in real estate before he turned 35. She had never met him personally, had only seen photos in business magazines where he looked stern and untouchable. But here, in person, there was something different about him. His steel-gray eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Unlike everyone else who looked at her with pity or awkward discomfort, Nathaniel's gaze held something else entirely. Recognition. Understanding. And beneath that, something that looked almost like anger, though not directed at her. Vivienne forced herself to look away, to focus on the task at hand. She took a shaky breath and spoke, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'm sorry to inform you all that there will be no wedding today. Cameron has decided he cannot go through with the ceremony. I apologize for any inconvenience, and I thank you for coming. The words hung in the air, stark and final. Then the whispers exploded into full conversations, gasps of shock, murmurs of sympathy, and a few scattered sounds of outrage. Vivienne didn't wait to hear more. She turned, her white dress swirling around her legs, and walked back down the aisle with as much dignity as she could gather. The breaking point. The moment Vivienne pushed through the cathedral's heavy wooden doors and stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, her carefully maintained composure shattered. The tears she had been holding back came flooding out, hot and unstoppable. She stumbled down the stone steps, her vision blurred, one hand reaching for the iron railing to steady herself. Behind her, she heard the doors open again. Footsteps approached, quick and purposeful. She expected her grandmother, maybe one of her friends, but when a hand gently touched her elbow, she turned to find Nathaniel Stone standing beside her. Up close, he was even more striking than she had realized. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark hair with threads of silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that held her, those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. You shouldn't be alone right now, he said, his voice deep and steady, with a rough edge that suggested he didn't often use it for gentle things. I don't even know you, Vivienne managed to say through her tears. No, Nathaniel agreed, pulling a crisp handkerchief from his jacket pocket and offering it to her. But I know what it feels like to be abandoned by someone who should have protected you. And I know that walking away with your head held high the way you just did takes more strength than most people possess in a lifetime. Vivienne took the handkerchief, pressing it to her eyes. The fabric smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something clean and masculine. Cameron was your mentee, she said. You must think I'm foolish for not seeing this coming. I think Cameron is a coward who didn't deserve you, Nathaniel said bluntly. And I think you deserve better than crying on church steps in a wedding dress. Something about his directness, his complete lack of pity or false sympathy, made Vivienne's tears slow. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw a man who carried his own scars, his own stories of pain hidden behind an expensive suit and an unshakable demeanor. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was fighting some internal battle. Finally, he said, "Let me take you somewhere away from here. Somewhere you don't have to pretend to be strong. Just for an hour. Then I'll bring you wherever you want to go." It was possibly the worst decision Vivienne could make, leaving with a stranger on what should have been her wedding day. But standing there in the sunlight, her heart in pieces, her future uncertain, she found herself nodding. "1 hour," she whispered. Nathaniel's hand remained steady on her elbow as he guided her toward a sleek black car waiting at the curb. And as they drove away from Sacred Heart Cathedral, away from the ruins of her carefully planned life, Vivienne Hart had no idea that her real story was only just beginning. The black car glided through the city streets in silence. Vivienne sat in the passenger seat, still clutching the handkerchief Nathaniel had given her, watching the world blur past the tinted windows. Her wedding dress pooled around her feet, the lace catching on the leather seat. She should have felt afraid, getting into a car with a man she barely knew, but somehow fear was the last thing on her mind. Exhaustion had replaced every other emotion, leaving her hollow and numb. Nathaniel drove with quiet confidence, his hands steady on the wheel. He hadn't tried to make conversation, hadn't offered empty platitudes about everything working out for the best. The silence between them felt strangely comfortable, like two wounded people who understood that sometimes words only made things worse. After 20 minutes, the car pulled up to a tall building in the financial district. Vivienne looked up at the sleek glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "My office building," Nathaniel replied, turning off the engine. "There's a private rooftop garden on the top floor. No one will disturb you there." He came around to open her door, offering his hand to help her out. The wedding dress made it difficult to move gracefully, and Vivienne stumbled slightly as she stepped onto the pavement. Nathaniel's arm came around her waist instantly, steadying her. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, warm and electric, completely inappropriate given the circumstances. They entered through a private entrance, bypassing the main lobby entirely. The elevator ride to the top floor was swift and silent. When the doors opened, Vivienne found herself stepping into an unexpected paradise. The rooftop garden was a hidden oasis in the middle of the concrete jungle, filled with flowering plants, small trees, and a bubbling fountain. String lights hung overhead, ready to glow when evening came. In the distance, the city sprawled out in every direction, but up here, it felt peaceful, removed from the chaos below. The storm within. Just as they stepped fully onto the rooftop, the sky opened up. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, the drops creating a gentle percussion on the leaves and stone pathways. Vivienne tilted her face up to the sky, letting the rain wash over her. Her carefully styled hair began to fall loose, the white roses drooping. Her makeup ran in dark streams down her cheeks. The wedding dress, that beautiful symbol of hope and new beginnings, grew heavy and sodden. She should have cared. Should have rushed for shelter. Instead, she stood there, arms slightly spread, letting the rain soak her completely. It felt like baptism, like washing away the entire terrible day, like nature itself was helping her cry when she had no tears left. Nathaniel stood a few feet away, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his expensive suit growing damp. He watched her with that same intense gaze, not moving, not speaking, just present in the storm with her. Finally, Vivienne turned to face him. "You must think I'm losing my mind," she said, water dripping from her chin. "I think you're being honest," Nathaniel replied, his deep voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "That's rare. Most people spend their whole lives pretending. Is that what you do?" The question came out before Vivienne could stop it, too personal, too direct. But Nathaniel didn't look offended. Instead, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Every single day," he admitted. Until about an hour ago. Truths in the rain. They moved under a covered pergola wrapped in climbing jasmine vines, the rain creating a curtain around them. Nathaniel shrugged off his suit jacket, which was only slightly damp, and draped it over Vivienne's shoulders. She pulled it close, grateful for the warmth despite the summer heat. "Tell me something real," Vivienne said suddenly, surprising herself with the boldness. "If we're going to stand here in the rain on the worst day of my life, tell me something true about you. Something you don't tell anyone." Nathaniel leaned against one of the pergola posts, crossing his arms over his chest. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured. "I built an empire because I was afraid of being powerless. My father left when I was 8. My mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on. I watched her break herself trying to give me a decent life. When I made my first million, I bought her a house. She lived in it for 6 months before cancer took her." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Success came too late to save the person I wanted to save. So now I have everything and it means nothing." The raw honesty in his words struck Vivienne like a physical blow. She had expected perhaps a business confession, a minor personal detail. Instead, he had given her his deepest wound, laid it bare without flinching. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. I told you because you asked for truth, and you deserve it after what happened today." Nathaniel's gray eyes found hers. "Your turn. Tell me something real." Vivienne took a shaky breath. "I spent the first 12 years of my life in foster care, moving from home to home. When my grandmother finally found me and took me in, I thought I had finally found where I belonged. But there's this fear that never goes away, this voice that says I'm still that unwanted little girl. When Cameron proposed, I thought I was building proof that I was worth keeping. That someone would choose me permanently." Her voice broke. "I guess I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," Nathaniel said fiercely, pushing off from the post and stepping closer to her. "He was wrong. He was weak and selfish and blind." The intensity in his voice made Vivienne's heart skip. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Nathaniel's hand lifted, hesitating for just a moment before his fingers gently brushed a wet strand of hair away from her face. "I know you walked down that aisle alone rather than hide. I know you announced the truth to 400 people with your voice steady even though your hands were shaking. I know you're standing here in a ruined wedding dress having the worst day of your life, and you're still the most captivating person I've ever met. The proposal that changed everything." Vivienne's breath caught in her throat. The way he was looking at her, the rain falling around them, the intimacy of their shared confessions, it all felt too intense, too much. She should step back, should thank him for his kindness and ask him to take her home. Instead, she found herself moving closer. "Why did you follow me out of the church?" she asked softly. Nathaniel's expression shifted, vulnerability flickering across his usually controlled features. "Because when I saw you standing at that altar, alone and brave and breaking, I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. Something I thought I had buried with my mother, with every relationship I've sabotaged, with every wall I've built. I felt like I wanted to know you, to protect you, to be the person who shows up for you when everyone else disappears." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Vivienne knew she should be cautious, should protect her already shattered heart. But there was something about Nathaniel, about his brutal honesty and hidden gentleness, that made her want to be reckless. "That's impossible," she said, even as her body swayed slightly toward him. "You can't feel that way about someone you just met." "Tell me you don't feel it too," Nathaniel challenged, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Tell me there isn't something between us right now that defies every logical explanation." Vivienne couldn't tell him that. Because she did feel it, the strange pull, the sense that this moment on this rooftop in the rain was somehow meant to be, despite the tragedy that had led her here. Before she could respond, Nathaniel spoke again, his words careful and deliberate. I have a proposal for you. Not what you're thinking, he added quickly when her eyes widened. Something unconventional. I'm listening, Vivienne said, curiosity cutting through her emotional fog. Stay with me. Not permanently, not with any expectations. Just for a while. Let me show you that you're worth more than someone who abandons you via text message. Let me give you time to heal, to figure out what you want next, without the pressure of facing everyone's pity and questions. Nathaniel's eyes searched hers. I have a penthouse with guest rooms. You would have complete privacy, complete freedom. I just want to give you space to breathe. That's crazy, Vivienne said immediately. We're strangers. Are we though? Nathaniel asked. After what we just shared? He had a point. In the last hour, she had been more honest with him than she had been with Cameron in 3 years. There was something about Nathaniel that made her feel safe enough to drop her guard, to show the broken parts she usually hid. What would you get out of this? Vivienne asked suspiciously. Nobody offers something like that without wanting something in return. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Maybe I'm tired of being alone in a penthouse meant for a family I'll never have. Maybe having someone there who understands what it's like to be abandoned would be less lonely than the silence. Or maybe, he paused, his voice becoming even softer, I just want to see you smile, and I have a feeling that's going to take more than one conversation in the rain. The beginning of something new. Vivienne should have said no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that accepting help from a billionaire stranger on the day she was supposed to get married was asking for trouble. But the rational part of her brain had led her to trust Cameron, had convinced her that being chosen meant being loved, and look where that had gotten her. Maybe it was time to be irrational. Maybe it was time to take a risk on something that felt right instead of something that looked right on paper. One condition, Vivienne said finally, her heart pounding. Complete honesty. No games, no hidden agendas. If this arrangement stops working for either of us, we say so. Nathaniel extended his hand. You have my word. Vivienne placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the strength in his grip. The handshake felt like a promise, like the beginning of something neither of them had expected but both desperately needed. The rain began to ease, softening to a gentle mist. The sun broke through the clouds on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Vivienne looked down at her ruined wedding dress, then up at the man who had appeared in her life at precisely the moment everything fell apart. I must look absolutely terrible, she said with a weak laugh. You look like someone who survived, Nathaniel said simply. That's beautiful. And standing there on that rooftop, still wearing the dress meant for a wedding that never happened, holding the hand of a man who had offered her sanctuary without asking for anything in return, Vivienne felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Not love, not yet. But hope. The fragile, tentative hope that maybe heartbreak wasn't an ending. Maybe it was just the painful beginning of something far better than she had ever imagined. 1 week had passed since the wedding that never happened. 7 days since Vivienne Hart had stepped into Nathaniel Stone's penthouse, still wearing her rain-soaked wedding dress, and agreed to the most unconventional arrangement of her life. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Her guest room was larger than the apartment she had shared with her grandmother, complete with its own bathroom and a small sitting area. Nathaniel had been true to his word. He gave her space, never pushing, never demanding anything. In the mornings, she would find fresh coffee waiting in the kitchen and a note telling her to help herself to anything she needed. Sometimes they would have dinner together, sharing quiet conversations about books, about dreams, about the small moments that make up a life. Other times, Vivienne would retreat to her room, and Nathaniel would respect her need for solitude. But something was growing between them, subtle as morning light but impossible to ignore. The way Nathaniel's eyes would linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way Vivienne's heart would skip when she heard his key in the door each evening. The accidental touches that lasted just a moment too long to be meaningless. Tonight, everything was about to change. The emerald dress. Vivienne stood before the mirror in her room, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The emerald green dress Nathaniel had sent up that afternoon hugged her curves perfectly, the silk fabric flowing like water with each movement. The neckline was elegant without being revealing, and the back dipped just low enough to be daring. Her dark hair was styled in soft waves, and minimal makeup highlighted her features without hiding them. A knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. Nathaniel entered, and the look on his face made her breath catch. He stood frozen in the doorway, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. But it was his expression that captivated her, the raw admiration in his gray eyes, the slight parting of his lips as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "You look stunning," he said finally, his deep voice rougher than usual. "The dress is beautiful," Vivienne replied, smoothing the silk nervously. "Though you still haven't told me where we're going." "The Harrison Foundation Charity Gala," Nathaniel said, stepping closer. "It's one of the biggest events of the year. I attend every year alone, write a check, and leave early." He paused, holding out his hand to her. "But tonight, I want to stay. With you." Vivienne placed her hand in his, feeling that now familiar spark of electricity. "Are you sure? People will talk. They'll want to know who I am." "Let them talk," Nathaniel said firmly. "I want the world to see you the way I do. Strong, beautiful, and deserving of someone who shows up." The gala. The Grand Hotel ballroom was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across marble floors. Hundreds of guests in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos mingled beneath soaring ceilings painted with classical frescoes. A string quartet played softly in one corner while waiters circulated with champagne and delicate appetizers. Vivienne felt every eye turn toward them as they entered. Whispers followed in their wake, and she recognized the curiosity in people's faces. Nathaniel Stone, the reclusive billionaire who never brought a date to any event, had arrived with a mysterious woman on his arm. "Nervous?" Nathaniel murmured, his hand warm and steady on the small of her back. "Terrified," Vivienne admitted with a small smile. "Just stay close to me," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." They moved through the crowd, Nathaniel introducing her to business associates and society figures. Vivienne was surprised by how natural it felt, how Nathaniel's presence gave her confidence. He never left her side, never made her feel like an accessory. Instead, he included her in conversations, asked for her opinions, made it clear that she was his equal, not his decoration. As they stood talking with a philanthropist about art education programs, Vivienne felt Nathaniel tense beside her. She followed his gaze across the room and felt her own body go rigid. Cameron Brooks stood near the bar, looking uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit. His eyes had found her, and the shock on his face was almost comical. The confrontation. Cameron pushed through the crowd toward them, determination etched on his features. Vivienne's hand tightened on Nathaniel's arm, her pulse quickening with a mixture of anger and old hurt. "Vivienne," Cameron said breathlessly when he reached them, completely ignoring Nathaniel. "I've been trying to call you. Your grandmother wouldn't tell me where you were. We need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss," Vivienne said, proud of how steady her voice remained. "Please," Cameron pressed, his eyes pleading. "I made a mistake. I panicked. Wedding nerves, you know how it is. But I realize now that I love you. I want to make this right." Nathaniel's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, letting Vivienne handle the situation her own way. She appreciated that more than words could express. "Wedding nerves?" Vivienne repeated, her voice sharp. "You sent me a text message 30 minutes before the ceremony. You let me walk down that aisle alone in front of 400 people. That's not nerves, Cameron. That's cowardice. I know, Cameron said quickly. But people make mistakes. Surely you can forgive me. We had 3 years together. That has to mean something. Vivienne took a deep breath, feeling years of trying to be enough, trying to earn love, trying to prove her worth, finally break free. It does mean something. It means I wasted 3 years on someone who didn't truly see me. Someone who took my love for granted. Someone who ran when things got real. Cameron's face flushed with anger. And what, you're with him now? He gestured at Nathaniel with barely concealed jealousy. My mentor? That's really classy, Vivienne. How long did you wait? A week? The claim. Before Vivienne could respond, Nathaniel stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding and dangerous. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but there was steel beneath the silk. Let me make something very clear, Brooks. Vivienne is not with anyone. She's a woman who deserves respect, something you clearly never learned to give. She doesn't owe you explanations, forgiveness, or a second chance. What she does, where she goes, who she spends time with, none of that is your concern anymore. Cameron opened his mouth to argue, but Nathaniel wasn't finished. You abandoned her at the altar. You broke her heart because you were too weak to face your own doubts like a man. You don't get to come back now that you've realized what you lost and expect her to welcome you with open arms. Nathaniel's gray eyes were cold as winter storms. She deserves better. She deserves someone who shows up, who stays, who sees her worth every single day. And you think you're that person? Cameron sneered. Nathaniel's expression softened as he turned to look at Vivienne, and in his eyes, she saw everything he hadn't yet said aloud. The growing feelings, the careful hope, the desire to be exactly that person for her. I'm trying to be, he said simply, honestly. The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and brave. Vivienne felt her heart, that organ she thought Cameron had destroyed beyond repair, suddenly beat with new purpose. She looked at Nathaniel, really looked at him, and saw not a billionaire offering charity, but a man who had opened his life and his heart to her when she needed it most. Without thinking, without caring that hundreds of people were watching, Vivienne reached up and cupped Nathaniel's face in her hands. Thank you, she whispered. For showing up. The kiss. Time seemed to slow. Nathaniel's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his usually controlled features. Then his hands came up to gently hold her waist, drawing her closer with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Vivienne, he breathed, her name a question and a prayer all at once. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss started gentle, tentative, both of them aware of the significance of this moment. But then something ignited between them, all the careful restraint they had maintained for the past week burning away in an instant. Nathaniel's arms wrapped fully around her, pulling her against him as the kiss deepened. Vivienne melted into his embrace, her fingers threading through his hair, her heart soaring. This was nothing like kissing Cameron. This was fire and safety all at once. This was coming home and starting an adventure simultaneously. This was everything she hadn't known she was missing. Around them, the gala fell away. The whispers, the stares, Cameron's shocked expression, all of it faded into irrelevance. There was only Nathaniel, solid and real and present, kissing her like she was precious, like she was chosen, like she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in that church, he confessed quietly. Because I wanted you to kiss me when you were ready, not when you were broken. I wanted it to mean something. His thumb traced her cheekbone gently. Does it mean something? Vivienne smiled, a real smile, the first genuine expression of joy she had felt in weeks. It means everything. New beginnings. Later that night, they stood on the penthouse balcony, the city lights spread out before them like fallen stars. Vivienne had kicked off her heels, and Nathaniel had removed his bow tie, both of them more comfortable in the quiet intimacy than they had been in the glittering ballroom. "I can't believe I kissed you in front of half the city's elite," Vivienne said, laughing softly. "I can't believe it took you a whole week," Nathaniel replied, a rare smile playing at his lips. She turned to face him, suddenly serious. "I need you to know something. What happened with Cameron, the wedding, all of that, it broke me. But it also freed me. I spent so long trying to earn love, trying to be enough. With you, I don't feel like I have to try. I can just be." Nathaniel pulled her close, his arms encircling her in a protective embrace. "You were always enough, Vivienne. More than enough. Cameron was just too blind to see it." "And you're not?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "I see you perfectly," Nathaniel said firmly. "I see your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I see the woman who walked down that aisle alone with her head held high. I see the person who took a crazy chance on a stranger's offer because she was brave enough to believe in new beginnings. I see you, Vivienne, all of you, and I'm in awe." Tears pricked her eyes, but these were good tears, healing tears. "I think I'm falling for you," she whispered. "Good," Nathaniel said, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "Because I've been falling for you since the moment you stepped out of that church. I just didn't want to rush you." "What happens now?" Vivienne asked. Nathaniel considered for a moment, then smiled. "Now, we take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and showing up for each other. We see where this goes, together." "Together," Vivienne repeated, the word feeling like a promise. As Nathaniel leaned down to kiss her again, soft and sweet under the starlit sky, Vivienne realized that her grandmother had been right about one thing. Everything happens for a reason. Her heartbreak at the altar had led her here, to this man, to this moment, to a love that felt real and solid and true. Cameron's abandonment had been the worst day of her life. But it had also been the day that set her free to find something better. Something worth staying for. Someone who showed up, who saw her, who chose her not out of obligation or habit, but out of genuine love and respect. The wedding that never happened had given her something far more valuable than a marriage built on shaky foundations. It had given her Nathaniel. And standing there in his arms, Vivienne knew with absolute certainty that some endings are just beginnings in disguise. Her heart, once shattered, was healing. And this time, it was being cared for by someone who understood its value, who treated it like the precious gift it was. This time, love felt like coming home.